من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. I greet you, my brothers and sisters, with the noble and universal greeting of peace, the greeting that has been used by the prophets and the messengers of our universal Creator, Almighty Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's indeed a privilege and an honor to be on the planet, alive, healthy and well, and to remember our Creator, to remind, for the Quran says, keep reminding, for reminding benefits the believers. And so that I am here and I am doing the reminding, I'm very grateful for that. And Hadith Qudsi says, if you mention Allah in a gathering, then Allah mentions you in a greater gathering. So it's an honor and a privilege to be among the planet, among the people who have lived on the planet, who live on the planet, and who will live on the planet, who submit, who bow, who are believers, those who are into Tawheed, on the planet, who have been and are now and will be. It is a privilege to be part of that group of human beings, although that group is not very popular on the planet. It's not the majority. It's never been the majority. Believers have been a minority, generally speaking, and even today. But I am nonetheless very grateful to be part of a minority. You know what they say about minorities? Minorities are generally not respected and all that sort of thing. So, never mind. It's one minority that I'm happy to be part of, is being a believer. And so, we continue with our discussion on what it means to be a believer. And for the past few weeks, I've been telling us that what it's not. I say, when human beings are on the planet, and we are living without claiming the refuge with Allah, without becoming aware of Allah, without guidance. When human beings live without guidance, then they continue to live in a spiritually impoverished way. You see, so the Quran says after Adam and Eve had their incident with Satan, and then came a consequence where they experienced a great insecurity. After the Prophet Adam repented, he was remorseful, and he recognized his error. They were at a level of awareness, and after that they were in another level of awareness, and he saw the difference, and he repented. He saw the error, and he was sorry. And it was told to him that there he and his people will remain until guidance comes. And those who do not receive the guidance will remain insecure. And those who will receive the guidance, they will be among the secure. And so the word mu'min is the secure. So if you live on the planet and guidance hasn't come to you, or you've turned your back to guidance, you will not experience being secure. So the key here is mu'mins are secure. Mu'min, the people who are believers, real believers, not those who say they believe but there's no faith in their heart. The Quran said to the Bedouin Arabs, do not say that you are believers, for faith has not entered into your heart. Rather say that you are one who's submissive in religion. Rather than speaking a lie. Don't speak a lie. They said, because you see, people think that because we said La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, we've taken the Shahada, that means we are believers. Speaking certain words doesn't mean that you're a believer. It could mean that you're a believer, but doesn't necessarily make you a believer. Because the Quran speaks of people who say they believe in Allah and they believe in the last day, but they don't believe in Allah in the last day. They lie to Allah, but they don't lie to Allah really. They try to lie to Allah, but they're only lying to themselves. There are people who are self-deceivers. And we spoke about them. They're called hypocrites. In their hearts is a disease, and that disease is expanded, and they are astray, and they will be left to stray. See, that's how you know when somebody is a hypocrite. They are astray, and there's a diseased heart, and they continue in that way because they are not looking for guidance. You get them? They're not receiving guidance. They are insecure, and the insecurities will reflect in them, their mentality, their behaviors, their lives, how they live, how they relate and interact. We'll speak more about that. But for now I'm just saying that those who receive guidance will no longer be astray, and they will no longer have a disease in their heart. They are the people who will bring to Allah a purified heart. Remember, that's what Allah tells us in the glorious Quran, that it's not going to avail you. Not your family, not your children, not your business, not your money. It's going to avail you. The only thing that's going to really benefit you upon your meeting with your Creator, when it comes to accountability, is who brings to Allah a purified heart. You get what I mean? So the Quran is about, if you remember Allah, you'll experience security, assurance, tranquility. Who remembers Allah? The believer is remembering Allah. You see, if you are thankful to Allah, you will experience having more in your life. Who will have more in their life? A believer. I can tell you at every passing day, I'm having more security in my heart, more peace in my heart, more assurance, more reassurance, more insurance. Why? Not because somebody told me some ideas and I have these ideas in my head. It's because I have submitted. Allah has guided me. If you believe in Allah, He guides your heart. Here we go again. If you believe in Allah, He will guide your heart. See? So, there are many who say they believe in Allah, but they don't believe. So their hearts are not guided by Allah. Their hearts is a disease, and that disease is expanded by Allah. And they're left to stray because they lie to themselves. Get what I mean? So I just want to make it very clear that there's four. Like if I asked you, like, what's your marital status? You can say, I've never been married, or I'm single, or I've been married, I'm married, I'm divorced, you can say things like, I'm a widow, I'm a widower. You can say that. So when it comes to spiritual status, there are four spiritual statuses. You get what I mean? The four, so when you are living your life, you can either be in the denier, the kuffar. I spoke about that. It's on podcast and it's on YouTube. Look for it. You'll find it, The Believer's Refuge. Allah, Almighty Allah, The Believer's Refuge. So there are those people who guidance has not come to them. They're still insecure after Adam and Eve's incident. They're living without conscious awareness and experiencing. They deny any power. They deny a power. That is unseen. They do not believe in the unseen. The Quran says it is a book for those who believe in the unseen. They have no clue of there is an unseen. There is that which is unseen. They're not aware of a world that exists that is not visible to us. You know what I mean? So they're like, whatever I see is real, and it's me, and I'm my body, and I'm my thinking, and I'm my personality. And they live very deeply identified to their, what I would call satanic self or phantom self, the denying self, the kuffar, the concealing self. They're not aware of truth, and they're not experiencing that truth, and they're not expressing life truthfully, and they're not appreciating. They kafuran, they're kuffar, they're deniers of the truth. They don't know why we are here, and they're not living to fulfill the purpose of our being on the planet. They're not doing that. And they're not generally grateful to Allah. They're not really like, wow, we've been given, and we are alive, and we continue in our aliveness. We didn't cause ourselves to be alive. We didn't cause ourselves to continue to be alive. We are human beings. We are highest life forms on earth. This guidance, Allah has guided humanity. They don't know all that. So you can be in your spiritual status. You can either be a kuffar, which I was, to be honest with you, at some point in my life. And your spiritual status, you can also be a associator. An associator says, no, I believe in a God. But you have all ideas about God. You're not really aware of our universal creator. You're not really aware of and experiencing Tawheed. You're not into Tawheed consciousness. You're not aware that only Allah actually exists. There's no you and Allah. There's only Allah, and because Allah is, you are. There's no submission to Allah. There's ideas in their head about a God. Many people say, I believe in a God. I don't know. I believe in a God. Where He is, what He's doing is somewhere and all that. These are fiction. They're fiction. They are people who have ideas about God, but they're not having an awareness and experience of God. And they could turn to people, they might say a man is God, a woman is God, they might say something in the created world is God, they might make up something in their imagination, in the fantasy world and say it's God. The people of Musa, they made a golden calf, and they said that's God now, we'll pray to that. You get what I mean? Turning to something in the created world, putting your trust in something in the created world or something that's in your imaginary world too, is an associator. You are projecting power out onto something that doesn't have power. And you think you believe in God, right? And so, spiritual status, you can be a concealer, a denier, which is kuffar. I started there at a certain point in my life, and associate, I had ideas about a God. There must be a God, it has to be, but I never knew that there's only God. Tawheed, the oneness, Ikhad, I never knew. Actual God. And then there's the hypocrites. They say, no, we don't just talk about a God. In fact, they might not even like the word God. They'll be like Allah, 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 Allah. So the hypocrites are people who are not really submitted. They're not really believers. Their heart is a disease. They're left astray. They're still insecure. They haven't become Allah conscious. They may use words like Islamic words, and they might do Islamic things. But they lie to themselves thinking they're lying to Allah. They're self-deceivers. They're not really believers. You get what I mean? They have ideas that are hypocritical. They behave sometimes like the kuffar, and they behave sometimes, like there's no God, and sometimes they behave like the mushrik, where they project power out onto God, and they don't know the power of God. They're not actually aware of God as sufficient, our universal creator, Almighty Allah as sufficient. They don't feel that assurance and reassurance. They're not spiritually developed. You get what I mean? But they have ideas about religion, and they have a religious identity. They stand in prayer. The Quran says, woe to those who stand in prayer, but whose hearts lack the smallest of kindnesses. You get what I mean? These are the hypocrites. These are the people that, dress the part, speak the part, try to show that they are believers, but they're not believers, by what the Quran tells us, not what I'm saying. I'm saying, so they're hypocrites. They lie to themselves. They might live, last night I read the verse from Surah Muhammad in the Quran, peace be upon him. It says, Allah is the supporter of the believers. The believers have Allah. The believers experience being supported by Allah. Allah is sufficient for the believer. Allah is adequate. When a person really knows Allah, they experience that sufficiency, that adequacy, that enoughness of Allah. You get what I mean? But somebody talks about Allah, but they're not experiencing in their heart that peace, that tranquility. When you remember Allah, hearts experience tranquility. You get what I mean? So the believers, the Quran says the believers, it doesn't say those submissive in religion or those, have a religious identity. It says the believers. Like it says, the believers are responded to in prayer. You get what I mean? Not those who are submissive in religion. The believers are responded to. That salah is the miraj of the believer. Dua is the weapon of the believer. So the Quran is telling us that the believer has the support of Allah, is experiencing Allah is supportive. The non-believers, they have no one. They have no one. You get what I mean? So when the hypocrites turn to Allah, they don't really feel that security and that assurance, because they have ideas of Allah. They don't have an awareness and experience of Allah. So they will project power out onto Allah. In fact, there's a lot of superstition, ignorance and arrogance, entitlement, feelings of separation, that self-righteousness, judgmentalism, that is prevailing in these three types, and especially in the hypocrite as well. They're not aware, they're not aware, they are ignorant, and they're superstitious. They're not conscious. They are unconscious, living unconsciously. They're not humble. They're arrogant. They're not really appreciative. They don't really recognize Allah's power and the extent of Allah's power. The Quran says the heavens and the earth were created that we and the jinn recognize Allah's power. Get what I mean? And that, we were given what we've been given, our existence and favors. Allah freely created us. Allah freely gave us the high status. But human beings are ungrateful, kafuran. So you'll find that the hypocrites, they talk a big talk. They act the big act. They do the big act. Everything. They might even sit in the prayer mosque all the time. They might, when you look at them, they're dressing and all that sort of thing. But you can see that there's no security. There's no peace. You can see that there's no peace. You get what I mean? You can feel that these are people insecure. You can see there's superstition, ignorance, arrogance, entitlement. There's no humility. There's no gratitude. There's no feeling of the sufficiency of Allah. You can see with the hypocrites there's no trust. You can see they don't know they have Allah. They don't know that Allah has given to them. They're not experiencing assurance and reassurance. Basically, they're not really spiritually developed. They haven't really received the guidance, and they're not using the guidance, and they're not experiencing being guided, and their hearts are still diseased, basically. You get what I mean? But this is how their minds work and that. And so the Quran tells us about all these three types of people. When you read the Quran, it says, are you going to follow the ways of your forefathers? You get what I mean? Are you going to continue in the ways that, are you going to continue in the ways of the people that the tribes that you come from? Or are you going to receive guidance? Are you going to allow yourself? And guidance is not brainwashing people. When you become aware of truth, and you're no more superstitious, and you're no more ignorant because you're aware, you're living at a higher level. That's how you become secure. Because you're not lost in that satanic trance. You're not lost in this world, all excited about this world like the world is alone, the real. You see, all these three types, I told you there's four spiritual, maybe five, but there are four definite spiritual status. What's your spiritual status? You see? So you might see yourself there as, I'm a denier, which I was. I'm an associator, which I was. Kuffar, mushrik, or hypocrite, munafiq, which I was too. And if you see yourself there, you have an opportunity to see that this is the major spiritual blocks that block human beings. You can't really progress in this world through your death and beyond if you remain in those three. You won't experience Allah as a supporter. You will not feel secure. You will never live your life beyond insecurity. All three types live the same. Although they might be like, atheists, like we don't believe in God and that's a religion in itself. And then you get all these different religions, but we believe in God and we believe like that and that's a different religions. And then you get the religions of, Islamism, that they speak about Allah but they're not aware of Allah. They're not aware of the power, the privileging, the Allah's provisioning of us. Allah's given us potentials and possibilities. They're not aware that Allah is our protector, our progressor, our prosperer. They're not aware that we have Allah. You get what I mean? So all three are insecure because all three are literally unaware of Allah. It's not about which beliefs you take. It's not about filling your mind with beliefs. It's about becoming more aware as a human being. Going beyond the satanic trances. Because the Quran says Satan, with that covenant Adam and Eve went with Satan, they had a deal with Satan, whatever, he let them down. He lied to them. He's a great deceiver. The Quran says don't let Satan deceive you as he deceived your foreparents. And the Quran says until we worship Allah, we are worshipping Satan. And the Quran is all about A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. That, you can live your life lost. And there's insecurity. Satan threatens you with insecurity and causes you to behave in ways unseemly. But Allah is waiting to forgive you. Allah extends His compassion and mercy to you. And Allah is waiting to give you His prosperity. You get what I mean? If you're living in any one of these three spiritual statuses, you'll be more or less like the people of the world. Most of the people of the world, although they have different ideologies, they are the same when it comes to the way they live. That's how you'll know. They're insecure and they're the same in the way they live. They're no different. But they think because they got different ideas, they are different. All three are in what I will call a spiritual caterpillar. You know, like all of us are there until we go into the cocoon and emerge from the chrysalis as a butterfly. The human beings are in a lower state of consciousness until they become aware of Allah, actually become aware of Allah, until they experience Tawheed. Tawheed is not an idea. Tawheed is truth. And when you become aware of truth, you're not the same person anymore. And you submit, you're not the same person anymore. And so that's where the spiritual caterpillar goes into, becomes a spiritual butterfly. This is getting into the cocoon. When you get into the cocoon, what happens is you are beginning spiritual development. And that's what Islam is. Islam calls people to Allah. Islam calls people to Allah. Islam calls people to the truth and says, come, come. And people say, all right, we're submissive in religion. You know what I mean? But the purpose of Islam is to actually be a believer. It's not just come and have, good habits. Don't drink alcohol anymore. Don't gamble. It's wonderful. It's wonderful that you don't drink alcohol and don't gamble. It saves your liver, saves your money. It saves the society. At least we're not opening up more gambling institutions in the country. Imagine if, gambling or alcohol was halal, how the businessmen with entrepreneurs, so-called Muslim, what they would have been doing. They would have been going for it, making money left, right, and center. As it is, cigarettes is, poisonous, but because it's not declared haram, it's fine, they sell it. You get what I mean? They've got no qualms about that. But what if the Quran says, only sell tayyib, halal and tayyib? Don't just sell halal meat. Don't just sell halal food, but sell tayyib food. We've made it our own thing. You see, the hypocrites, they pick and choose. So you'll get somebody who'll open up a shop and they're selling food. And they say, is the meat halal? Is the meat halal? Yeah, but is the meal tayyib? No, we're not worried about that. This is a hypocrite. We don't care, man, about the teachings of Islam. As long as we said the kalima and as long as we are in the mosque, we lie to ourselves and we lie to Allah. You know what I mean? The Muslim businessmen are the same. It doesn't matter. Is it halal? Don't worry whether it's tayyib. Is it halal? So yeah, okay, it's halal. So why do you deny tayyib? The Quran says, consume halal and tayyib. Consume. Put in your body halal and tayyib. Have in your life halal and tayyib. But it's only for the hypocrites, they only pick and choose what suits them. Halal, but not tayyib. You get what I mean? So you can see hypocrisy in what I'm talking about. A believer is operating at a different level. A believer is a different human being. They're not like other human beings. Let's sell and make money. But what is halal? What is it haram? And just from an ideology, their believing businessman is different from a non-believing businessman. You get what I mean? When we're in society as believers, we are different from other types of people. A believing mother or father is different from a non-believing mother and father. A believing son or daughter is different from a non-believing son and daughter. A believing brother and sister is different from a non-believing brother and sister. A believing, like I said, doctor is different from a non-believing doctor. And doesn't mean because they've got a Muslim name they're a believing doctor. You get what I mean? Or professional, or a believing accountant is different from a non-believing accountant. You can have an accountant who's a denier. You can have an accountant or a doctor who is an associator. You can have a doctor or accountant or businessman who is a hypocrite. And you can have a doctor, accountant, businessman, whatever, plumber, who is a believer. You see, a believer is completely different. That's why I said the believers are in a minority on the planet. Even in the fold of so-called Islamism, the believers are a minority in the cult that is Islamism. You know what I mean? The hypocrites who say they believe in Allah but they have no submission, they're not aware of Allah. They say that they read the Quran but they don't receive the message of the Quran, the guidance to humanity. They say they follow the Prophet just because they got a beard, but there's no real mannerisms and character. You get what I mean? They say all these kind of things, but they're not really meaning it. So, if you choose, if you are here on the planet and you choose to be a believer, the Quran guides us. It tells us that Satan is an enemy avowed, and that we are to claim refuge from Allah, with Allah. We are to claim refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. That if you live your life, you will either live your life as one who is continuing to worship Satan if you don't submit. If you don't take Allah as your refuge, you will continue to live your life as one worshipping Satan. In these three spiritual status, denier, associator, hypocrite. And nothing is bad. This is not a shaming thing. When I say this, that such and such person is a denier, or such and such person is an associate, or such and person is a hypocrite, that's not shaming anybody. That's mentioning, it's describing. It's done with caring for human beings. It's done with respect for human beings. It's not done from self-righteousness. I want you to understand that, because I was that. All three, at different times. And now, I am a believer. I am now in a believer. So, a believer, I in fact was drawn to being a believer before I was drawn to being a real Muslim. Before I was a fanatical Muslim, when I was in a religious idea and this cult system and all that sort of thing. I was a religious addict and a fanatic and all that. But after that, after I, shukr to Allah, Allah guided me to Himself and submission. And the Quran says, among all people are believers. It even says, among the Christians and the Jews and the Sabians and all that, they are believers. So, don't ever think that only what you think is a Muslim is a believer. The Quran says that there have been before the Prophet Muhammad believers. You understand? Believers didn't start at the time of the Prophet Muhammad. He became a believer. He was guided to submit. You see? But before Islam, they were believers. Ibrahim alayhi salam was a believer. There was no Islam in the way that we understand it. 5 pillars and so on and so forth. He was a believer. People who are actually Allah conscious. I am, personally speaking, I'm drawn. I value Islam. It's a great, wonderful way to support society. I respect everything about Islam. I'm proud to say that, my religion is Islam. But that's not my main focus. My main focus is Iman. You get what I mean? I'm not worshipping Islam. I'm worshipping Allah. The first pillar of Islam, Tawheed. That has been my main focus. That's what the Prophet taught people for the first 10 years or 12 years or so of his prophethood, before there was any kind of religious organization or any kind of communal worshipping and so on and so forth, or rituals that people were doing, whatever it is. He taught people about Allah and their relationship with Allah. Are you with me? So, don't think, from your thinking that you're not aware that there are no believers among other people. There are believers. What is a believer? One whom everybody is secure from. Who's that? One who is actually aware of Allah. One who is aware of truth. Not one who is superstitious. One is ignorant. One is arrogant. One who is entitled, carrying on entitled. One who is feeling separate. One who is judgmental. One who is living life fearfully, insecurely, whatever it is. So, this fourth, you get invited to truth. Whether that's Islam, come, let me tell you about Islam. But But let me tell you about Allah first. You can't tell somebody about Islam if you don't tell them about Allah. I know that's what happened in our madrasa systems. We are told about Islam instead of drawing closer to Allah. The Prophet's methodology and the Quran's methodology is first become aware of Allah. Become Allah aware. Become conscious of Allah. Because if you're not, you're living without Tawheed, and then you're living in the satanic trance. So all three types are in their ways until guidance comes to them. And so that guidance can be Islam. Somebody's calling them to truth. And like how I'm talking to you. I'm saying to you, people, I'm inviting you to truth. I'm not inviting you to believe things. I'm not inviting you to join me. I'm not inviting you to do things. I'm inviting you to a higher level of awareness. Beyond that Satan worshipping, beyond that worshipping of Satan and living satanically that produces insecurity, there is a return. There's plenty of verses of the Quran. If you return to Allah, not like when you die and you go, but while you're here, you turn to Allah. You must turn to Allah, the Quran is telling us. This is success. If you fail to turn to Allah, not to turn to religion or ideas of Allah or ideas of God, but to turn to Allah, to actually choose to include Allah in your awareness as Allah really is, to actually become aware of and experience Allah consciousness. You get what I mean? It frees you from living in that trance, the trance of insecurity, the trance of superstition, ignorance, arrogance, entitlement, separation. Get what I mean? Threat, vulnerability, self-protection. Because until you become aware of truth and submit to Allah, you will live in fear. You'll be scared. Satan will be threatening you. Satan threatens those and causes them to behave in ways unseemly until you recognize the compassion of Allah and you realize the error of your ways. And then Allah purifies your heart when you choose to draw closer. So the fourth way is when you are introduced to truth, which is like submissive in true Islam, not in the Islam of what's going on today. Is it halal, but I don't care about that. You're picking and choosing. That's not the true Islam. The true Islam is a benefiting, a guidance of humanity to live connected with Allah, to live acknowledging Allah, to live responding to Allah's relating. The Quran says that. Let them respond to Allah. Allah responds to the believer, but let the people respond to Allah. None of these three types of people are actually aware of Allah and actually aware of Allah's relating to them. And they are not actually responding to Allah. The Quran says if you have Iman and you have Amal, that means if you live spiritually developed, because that's what the Quran is there for, is there to guide humanity into a process of spiritual development that we can then live as people who are spiritually developed. This is very, very important. As I go forward, inshallah, in the next few weeks, I will be talking about the believer and the spiritual development and how you live when you are a believer. That's very different from these three other types and how they live. None of these three types are actually spiritually developed. They're still insecure. They still feel threatened and vulnerable. They don't feel assured or secured vulnerable. They don't feel like, we have Allah who has cared for us, who is caring for us, who is taking care. They don't feel that. They don't feel that. They're not aware of Allah. If you speak to the hypocrites, they'll tell you, fear Allah, live in fear, live in threat, live in threat. What happens when you feel fear? Your body produces adrenaline. You can't think properly. You can't function, in a way. You cause disease for yourself. When you live feeling threatened, it is the most unnatural thing you can do. The Quran says when you remember Allah, your heart experiences assurance. You see, when you're actually aware of Allah as a believer, you actually feel the opposite of insecurity, and there's an opposite cascading of biochemistry in your body. When you're aware of Allah, light, there's nur. You understand? When you feel threatened and vulnerable, go and look at beggars and needy people and all that. How you feel around them, their energy, their vibration, their light. There's no nur there. There's no nur. You get what I mean? So a believer, you will know them because they have a different awareness, a different experiencing, they have a different expression, they have a different appreciating. Everybody is safe from them. Get what I mean? But any one of these other three, which I was, and I'm glad to say I'm not there anymore, you feel fear and threat. You live turning to somebody or something. You get what I mean? The hypocrites say, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. They have no clue what they're saying in Surah Fatiha. But what it means is, Allah, you alone are for us to presence and to experience presence by you. We worship you. The hypocrites don't know what worship is. They think it's doing rituals. There's no difference from somebody just doing rituals unaware of Allah in so-called Muslim people, and others from other religions just doing rituals unaware of Allah. There's no real difference. They still, they still got no light in their hearts. They still got no awareness and experience. There's no expression of security. There's no appreciation from them. There's no knowing that we have Allah. The extent of Allah and extent of Allah's sufficiency, they don't feel that. So all three of this insecure spiritual caterpillars are, they have threatened vulnerability and they behave badly. They feel controlled by the world. They try to control the world. They're insecure. Satan is with them. The Quran, Satan threatens them with insecurity. Not Allah threatens your insecurity. Satan threatens your insecurity and causes you to behave in ways unseen. So they live like, let's just sell halal, but not tayyib. You get what I mean? Let's forget about tayyib. It's a good idea. Let's make money. Money is the most important thing. Taking the society into destruction. Taking themselves, their families, for what? A miserable price, the Quran says. For what? You sacrifice on yourself and your family and society. For what? Money? And then look where you got all your money and look what you got, nothing beyond that. Because you're not secure. If you're secure, you won't live in fear, but the marketplace. But we got to sell. And no different from other people. When I was in Turkey, about a year ago, just over a year ago, and I was speaking to this one guy. It's a nice story. So he was selling pajamas. He's telling me, I'm in this business, 20 years, he told me. I said, you're in the pajama business for 20 years? He said, no, I'm in the textile business for 20 years. So I told him, you are smiling at me and, you're talking to me, but what's happening with the people around you? They're not smiling and talking to me. You're the only one smiling and talking to me. Yeah, what's going on? You know what I mean? And he says, we're going through a very tough time in Turkey and the economy is collapsing and, all that, and our businesses are finished. You know what I mean? And I told him, I want to tell you something, my brother. I can see you're a Muslim. Allah is beyond the economy. We have Allah. Allah responds to the believer. No matter what seems to be going on, if you are certain with Allah, that feeling of feeling certain, I have Allah, I will never be let down. The hypocrites are like, yeah, we believe in Allah, but look what a big problem this is. Oh, but we'll never get what we want. We have to depend on our own intelligence. Those are people who haven't submitted. When I told him that, his hand went out like a spring, and he shook my hand. He said, thank you for reminding me. I said, well, now that you know, go and tell these other people that the believer doesn't worry. The believer doesn't fear. When the Prophet was in the cave with his noble companion Abu Bakr alayhi salam, and respect given to him as well, and Abu Bakr Siddiq, and outside was the Meccans, and they wanted to assassinate them. There was a little hole in the wall, they were in this little cave, and there was no seeming like protection. Hazrat Abu Bakr, not Hazrat, but whatever he is, respect to him, he thought logically, we are in this hole in the wall, outside is the Meccans, they're going to get us, it's over. Seemingly logical, because you're looking at the world. But the Prophet said to him, have no fear, for Allah is with us. Now that's a believer, that's a submitter. They feel, no matter what your eyes are seeing, You know, let me see the power of Allah in the world. Allah spins the earth on the axis. Allah has given me life. Allah has power over all things. The Quran says that. Allah is over all things competent. See, the hypocrites are reading it, flying through it. They don't stop to read with understanding. They don't stop to understand what is the message of the Quran. What is this revelation doing for me spiritually? It's telling me that the power of Allah is, I'm limiting in my mind. I have a limited understanding of Allah. I don't know Allah. I'm keeping myself from a great assurance. There is a power. When these defensive wars were fought by the Prophet said, hey, we are a few in number, and look at those people, 3 times our number or so. Allah says, if you can only see the legions that I have sent to protect you, that which you can't see and how many they are and what support they are for you, unseen. This is what I was telling us earlier, that those who believe in the unseen, the Quran is a book for those who believe in the unseen, establish regular prayer, and give of what has been given to them. Now, the hypocrites, they don't believe in the unseen. They believe in their own thinking. No, we know, our teachers are right, we are authorities, we know. They have not submitted their minds. They have not submitted. The hypocrites have not submitted. See, they don't realize Allah's intelligence is the only intelligence. We have no intelligence. We can only be aware of what Allah has allowed us to be aware of. And I can be aware of Allah's power is beyond any human being or any authority, so-called authority, political authority. Why do the Muslims suffer in the world so-called Muslims suffer in the world as victims of other people and of people they claim are non-believers? Because they do not know the power of Allah. Allah will never fail a believer. Allah will never fail a believer. Allah will never fail a believer. But they don't feel it. They don't feel what I just said. They got stories about Allah. And they have not submitted. In their hearts is a disease, you see. So when I as a believer am aware of Allah, I'm aware of the power of Allah. I've submitted my mind in what Satan tells me. Satan tells me my goose is cooked, it's over, there's nothing I can do. I must despair. The Quran says the believers never despair. The believers never despair. Was it Yaqub alayhi salam who said to his children, it is only a disbelieving people that despair. It is only a disbelieving people who despair. See, he was a believer before the Prophet ﷺ, long before Yaqub alayhi salam, the great-grand uncle of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, great. Never despair. You see, so this man in Turkey is looking around, people are in despair. And that's what Satan wants you. In fact, Iblis, apparently, I don't know if it's true, in Arabic means despair. Iblis, to despair. When you worship Satan, he's telling you, do something wonderful, you'll save yourself, go for relief, safety, excitement, this is good. But he's selling you a false bill of goods, he's lying to you, he's a deceiver. Satan has no authority over you if you're a believer. The Quran says that. If guidance comes to you and you choose that guidance and you become aware of Allah, you really become aware of Allah, you want to become aware of Allah, you want to experience Allah consciousness, and you submit, you do. You're happy to submit. Satan will have no authority over you. Satan only has authority over you when you deny Allah. This is why we say, I claim refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Allah is my refuge. Allah is sufficient as a refuge. I'm among those who receive the guidance that a refuge is required. A refuge is required. You get what I mean? So a believer is one, is not the same as other people. In fact, the Quran says, those who are aware and those who are not aware are not the same. They're not the same. I, as a believer, am not the same when I was a hypocrite. I can feel the difference. There is this feeling within me that I feel in my heart. It's spiritual, I don't know what you call it, spiritual power, spiritual energy, it's peace, it's love, it's compassion, it's security. There's no fear. The friends of Allah, they will never fear nor will they grieve, the Quran says. The Quran says those who believe will not fear and grieve. Why? Because we know this world is temporary. Why? Because we know we have Allah in this world through our death and beyond. Why? Because we know that we are here to awaken from thinking that we know the world is real, the satanic trance that people are in, excitement, it's all about this world. I need to sell more, make more money, let me sell things that are not tayyib, make money because it's halal. You know what I mean? We will regret it. Well, not so much me, shukr to Allah. I mean, guidance has come to me, I have submitted, I put my faith and trust in Allah. Allah is sufficient for me. I feel it. I feel a different chemistry, a different biochemistry in my being. I feel it. It's healing. Those who live in fear and threat not aware of Allah's sufficiency for them. They live in fear. That's where the immune system collapses. That's when they feel worried and scared. I will not worry. For what must I worry? Why must I be worried? I have Allah. I'm aware of Allah's power. Allah is enough for me. He says if I appreciate, I get more. What must I worry about? What is the hypocrite's response to that? Stories in their head. They want to follow in the ways of their forefathers. Anyway, I'm going to conclude now by saying this, that human beings can live in either those three caterpillar states, spiritual states, or they can be called to guidance, and they can be among those Muslims who actually submit. And you can become a person who has iman and conduct yourself with amal and have a life tayyibun. This is what the Quran is all about. Spiritual development. These three are not spiritually developed. Psychological development. Those three may or may not be psychologically developed. And interpersonal development. It says like, believers must marry believers. Allah has put love and compassion in our hearts that we may dwell with each other in tranquility. You see? A believer is not going to treat their husbands and wives like dirt. Like we heard from that Muslim woman who said her husband is very learned in deen. I don't know what she's talking about. I really don't. Because if he was learned in deen, he would be thankful to Allah. Allah has given us the gift of godliness. You know what I mean? Allah has given us the gift of experiencing peace. Allah is salam. We can experience being at peace. Allah is sabur. We can experience being patient. Allah is Al-Wadud, the loving. We can experience being loving. Allah is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the compassionate, the merciful, the forgiving, the pardoning. Allah is the giving, the gracious, the granting, the freely giving. See, those of us who are aware of Allah, we have a different biochemistry. You have a different biochemistry. You've got to feel chemistry with your Creator. You've got to feel it. That's how you know your heart is healed. If you're not feeling it, you're not a believer. You're just saying it and thinking it. You've got stories, but you're living in the biochemistry of a believer. You're living in a mentality, you're not living in the biochemistry of a believer, you're living in the biochemistry of a non-believer. That's why the sicknesses are there, the diseases are there. You see so-called Muslim people getting sick left, right and center. Ibrahim alayhi salam said, I have Allah. The one who created me will heal me. With confidence he said it. Here you have Islamis, hypocrites, needily, please, you must beg, you must beg, you must beg. Allah has power. You don't know. You don't have to beg. You don't have to act desperate like I'm forcing it out of Allah. Allah is the freely giving. When somebody is aware of Allah's freely giving ways, it's very different from thinking Allah is not freely giving and I have to force it out of Him. You see, it's a different thing when you live as a secure person, when you live as a believer. Your whole biochemistry, your mentality is different. You're different in the world. You're not living in fear, threat. You're not, whatever is happening in the world, you know it has no power over you. People can call themselves authorities. You know they have no authority. You know the one authority that is Allah. You live with iman. You live with amal. You behave in a way with you, your body, your life, respectful. You're respectful of Allah, you're respectful of the body He gave you, yourself, your life. You live with self-respect, life respect, halal and tayyib, with your body, with your life, with other people. You relate to people with these essences of compassion and love. That's how you know a believer. Can somebody be learned in deen but not to be compassionate to their own spouse? I don't know how you can say that. It's an oxymoron. It's a direct contradiction. You know what I mean? It's like saying there's an insecure, secure person. No. There's a secure person can see, is appreciative, is thankful. Is thankful for the opportunity for human beings to live at these highest levels on the planet. And that's what the believer is doing. They're close to Allah, they respect themselves, their bodies and their life, and they live in a tayyibun way. They live with others in respect. They respect themselves, other people around them, society. They don't play a destructive role in their own lives. They don't play a destructive role in their families. They don't play a destructive role in society. A real believer does not play a destructive role. Nobody wants to hear this, right? Because people want to live as hypocrites. The Quran says you are the best of people given to humanity, the best of people. Who? The believer, not the hypocrite. The Quran says for the hypocrites, there is hell. They're with Satan, they will be with Satan, they'll die with Satan, they'll be raised up with Satan. Until you be aware of the compassionate nature of Allah, a Satan is attached to you, and that Satan is influencing you. You get what I mean? So, I'm among those who choose spiritual development. I'm among those who support spiritual development. And that's what I'm a person of a'uzu. What is a'uzu? I choose to live my life beyond the 3 underdeveloped roles and choose the way of spiritual development. That's what I choose. And it requires receiving guidance. And then when you're guided, you won't be the same person. You'll have a higher level of awareness, higher level of experiencing, higher level of expressing, higher level of appreciating. You'll feel different. You'll look different. You'll think different. You'll act different. If you haven't gone through this, that means you still haven't awoken. You're still worshipping Satan. You're still in a trance. The world is very real for you. Things in this world are very real. You say you believe in Allah in the last day, but you're not really preparing for the hereafter. You're not really realizing my work here is to stop worshipping Satan. My work here is to be among those who are on the planet, who are believers. See, shukr to Allah who has guided me. I mean, what is more beneficial than this in knowledge? I've been to university, I've heard people speak, I've read books. Let me tell you something. If you die without submission, it is the worst thing for you. And the Quran cautions us, and the Prophets have cautioned us. And I'm thankful. I am among those who have submitted. I am on the path. Things just get better and better for us. Why do things get better and better for the people on the path? It's not superstition. It's not belief system. When a person is more respectful to Allah than they were before, they were unaware, they're different people. They're more secure. Their lives are better as more secure people. When people receive the guidance of Allah and they choose to live as honorable human beings, they don't mess up their lives. They don't mess up their lives. When people live with that spiritual development with Allah, that personal development with themselves, and they live with the development with other people, their lives get better. This is why on the path, the lives of the believers get better. Those who remain hypocrites, they have no proper relationship with Allah. They're not into halal and tayyib for themselves, their bodies, their life, society. They're not into their people and their family and real living as psychologically, spiritually developed, psychologically developed, interpersonally developed, living here as a believer, respecting life as a believer, life tayyibun. Receiving Allah's good in this world and the world beyond, they don't know. They don't know, they don't know. The thing they know, they're lost. And they continue in their darkness, the Quran says. Shukr to Allah, I'm not one of those anymore. Allah's mercy has guided me. And I'm where I am, and I'm going higher and higher in spiritual growth. I have nothing to worry about. I'm very grateful, shukr to Allah. All praise, glory and thanks is due to Allah Almighty. His choicest blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.